Hello, from Round Top Church Christian Fellowship. Here is the second Sunday into January in the year of the Lord 2022. I like to say it that way, in the year of our Lord. And so it has been 2,222 years from the birth of Christ. So we have a sermon today. We talked about Paul's letter in chapter 6, verses 5 through 9. And he's talking about slaves and masters. And, people in America might read that passage and say, well, we had slavery here a few hundred years ago, Civil War 170 years ago, or 60s, 50. And, but obviously we still deal with the issues. And so we have a sermon today that talked about slave and masters. And we also talked about what was God's intent for our country. And as flawed as the founders were, they did some things that were obviously not right, and they did some things that were great and really good. But above all, what they did is they gave a foundation for us to grow from. They were stuck in I say stuck, they came from a European culture and economy, and when this country was formed and we broke from King George of England, there were moves to break away from the tethers of a lot of the sins, if you will, of the European nations. And it took us a while to do that, and in my opinion too long, but we did struggle through that, and we have the country we have today, a republic that is. And so there's a lot of technical things here. This is a church, but pastors, we are called to talk about all things. There's nothing that's off limits for God's called spokespersons to speak about. You go back and read your Bible, it was Nathan, God's prophet, God's called spokesperson, who went to King David and said, "Hey, man, you've messed up with this, this woman Bathsheba," and called him on the carpet, if you will. It was Samuel, God's spokesperson, who went to King Saul and said, "Hey, you're messing up." It was Jesus who addressed the theocratic religious leaders of his day, and we can read about it in Matthew 23. And so, pastors and God's called spokespersons, everything is on the table in our society to talk about. There's nothing off limits. And I think it's part of the problem we have in this country is that you come to church, you listen to pastors, biblical teachers, and to me, the enemies of God want us to only talk about certain things, but that's obviously, there's a reason in our country that we have freedom of speech and freedom of the press. And this is and freedom of religion. The state shall not establish a religion, nor interfere with the free exercise of. And so with all that said, Tommy, what did you see in today's sermon that you want to talk about?
Well, there was a couple of things that came up, and I've always been intrigued with how much Christianity really was involved in the formation of our country with all our founding fathers. And then you made mention right at the first of your sermon about the Great Seal, and that most of our founding fathers were Christians, but some were not. And the two that you depicted as being the ones who designated and taught, all the stuff to do the Great Seal was, at the time when you started talking about it, it was Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, the two that I would be the least expected to be the ones, because that depicted the Exodus that, into Egypt. And could you just expand on that a little bit?
Sure.
Because I think people forget, the whole premise that you talked about this morning at the start of it was what the Christian's history is, I think, with the starting of our country, that people have forgot. They don't know that history. So
We don't, and unfortunately it's not taught in grades 1 through 12 in public schools. It needs to be, because it's a great part of our history. Right, wrong, and different, wherever people think about it, these are factual things that took place. Now, let me make a qualification here. I've been asked the question, what is a theist? A theistic person. What is a deist? A theistic person means that you believe in God that interacts with people, that has interaction. A deist, and this is what I believe probably most likely Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin, if they're going to be classified as a religious people, you could say they probably fall into the category of deism, deist. In other words, they believe God created the world and created us, but doesn't interact. Don't really believe in miracles, but God is present in when He is created. but not so much interaction. That's why it's a surprise that Lincoln and, excuse me, that Franklin and Jefferson, the two I would class as deists, that they presented the idea of a great seal of America to be a depiction of a cloud by day and a fire by night, leading the American people forward as God led the people, his chosen people, the Hebrews, out of Egypt during the Exodus. Well, that seal wasn't adopted by Congress. I believe, what do we have, the eagle?
Yeah.
And so, but I think it's important, and I have a book that details all of this, put out with the Library of Congress. So that's fascinating. That our founding fathers, they weren't obviously perfect guys. They had a lot of failings and a lot of shortcomings. But God works through all of us with our shortcomings and our failings, and gives us the plan he puts in front of us to achieve, and we move in that direction to achieve it. And our founding fathers were in the same situation. So you have another question, or?
Yeah, then toward the end of your sermon today, you put numerically explain the top 10 countries that have slavery still now. I think you made it real clear about the fact that we carried our association with slavery was carried over from the European influence that we had, and obviously the South and some of that. But we were addressing all that leading up to the Civil War. But making someone think that, okay, now it's over with and there's no more slavery, but in the world, I mean, there was like 8 million that were just in India itself. And I'd just like to hear you tell me what I, as a Christian, that hears a message like that, what I could do besides pray. Is there anything that you know of a group that's addressing this throughout the world, or whatever? Well,
as I listen to my sermon, there's a lot of you can go online and find organizations that are like the watchdog organizations for slavery around the world. And for those of you who don't know, I mean, there's obviously human bondage, sexual trafficking of women, young girls, and boys, and the sex trade around the world. But there's forced labor. There's forced conscription into military. In India, the reason they're on this list, it explains in the article, I mean, there's obviously a problem there, just like there is in every country. They have a caste system there. And I think India is a great country, but like all of our countries, we've trying to move away from some things that we've had historically done, and I see them moving away from. But the caste system in India puts the lowest class of people into really a servitude of class of people, and not by their choice. And you need to look into that. What is the caste system in India today, and what the people at the bottom of that caste system, what's their chances of upward mobility? They're zero. As a matter of fact, they're so strict in some portions of India that if children even play together that are in different castes, they can get in a lot of trouble for that. Not supposed to happen. And so that's one of the reasons why India is so high. My sermon will be online at roundtopchurch.org. Go to sermons and pull it down, because it's pretty detailed about some of these things. And in these reports, it not only lists the countries with the most slaves in them, but then it lists another list of per 1,000, per 10,000 people, how many slaves do they have, or per 1,000 people, how many slaves do they have. And that way India is way down on the list, because India has over 1 billion people in there. So what is the number of slaves?
Right short of 8 million.
8 million. So 8 million people out of over 1 billion is a smaller percentage than another country that has slaves, like Iraq, or excuse me, Iran. Who else is on this list?
Yeah, Afghanistan, the Philippines, which is Iran, Nigeria, North Korea, it's Congo. So we're talking about more, I guess, left-leaning countries too.
Yeah. So, Americans, what can we do? Is real simple. Yes, you pray, like Tommy said. But the more we're informed, we tell our neighbors, and we talk to our government officials. We talk to, who were, when I say government officials, you have a voice there. Write a letter to your congressman and say, hey, did you know that these the slave trade is ongoing in these countries, and what is America's involvement with these countries? Public pressure in America is huge, and we need to talk to our elected officials about that, because America sends aid all over the world, and we interact in many ways with these countries, and a lot of these countries that are on the list we interact with. And so public opinion in America can sway public policy internationally. It really can over time. I know it might seem like a long shot, but that's what we can do. And then our witness. If you can be involved in an international ministry that's into one of these countries, and that supports missionaries there or Christian ministries there, that can change the hearts and minds of the leaders there, to change their systems from internally. Just like in this country, slavery was a huge issue. We have a lot of civil war over it, but the churches, were a huge involvement in recognizing that that people of African descent or black people, they're created in God's image too, just like we are. And it's just not Christian to view another human being not being created in God's image. And this is a key point in our history, that all men are created equal under God and should be viewed and treated the same by the government. So it doesn't happen overnight. It takes years and decades, sometimes lifetimes, to change systems. But Tommy, we got to start somewhere. Look at our own country. I mean, it took us from the inception in 1788, when the Constitution was passed, ratified, in 1791 the Bill of Rights, and then it was 1794 the first act by Congress making it illegal for any American ships to import slaves. And then, I could go on down the list how many states started abolishing slavery before the Civil War. And so, yes, the economy of the South was dependent upon slaves, and there was a lot of other issues involved in the Civil War, but that was obviously a prominent one. But we changed. It was painful. I pointed out today that current studies show that there was over 750,000 American soldiers killed, and just soldiers killed in the Civil War. We paid a heavy price for slavery, and still do to this day. So these other countries, unfortunately, they may have to go through some similar pain, but we can assist them in prayer, talking to our leaders, and try to influence the policies in their countries, not only through politicians, but through Christian ministries that are nearby. Okay, a lot going on here. Be sure to check our website out, roundtopchurch.org, and you can also email me at the email on the screen here, and then look forward to receiving y'all's comments. I really want to dialogue about these things. These are huge issues in our country, and something we can talk to our neighbors about. So thanks, Tommy, for coming in, asking a few questions, and God bless each and every one of you. Amen.